Okay, so this is the last couch of the evening. We're going to have my finance director at Hudson is Brendan Gilmore. So Brendan came on board a couple of years ago. He's got a background in law, business and education. So bringing Brendan on board has allowed us to also look at lending in the commercial space as well with his legal background. I won't talk to Brendan too long tonight because we've run over time a lot. So I really just wanted to put a face to the name. Lots of big things happening in finance. Brendan and his team is across self-managed super funds, commercial, resi, development, you name it, they can do it. Brendan, I will hand over to you for a couple of minutes, but you've only got a couple of minutes, and then I'm going to bring my property guys up.
Awesome, thanks, Waddy. Juanita, big sis. So we're a family firm here. As you know, Hudson's 31 years old, and both my sisters are involved, and myself. So since coming on, heading up the finance of what we do at Hudson, we've massively expanded our team and processes and systems we have in place. A lot of technology's changed over the last couple of years. A lot of things have changed in the lending space. We have the wonderful team that we work with now who you all would have met as you came in. They're on the registration desk. So big shout out to Heather, Pemma and Helen over there. Give away, woo! Thank you guys. And Ariane, who's not here tonight. So we have a wonderful team. We do have capacity to do everything really in the lending space. Rather than do a Q&A and go through that now, though, I think we'll give the time to the other guys and our wonderful guests to come up on stage. But there are QR codes around the back of the room with all the bios of all of the team members at Hudson. So if you scan that on your phone, or of course get in touch with us through the wonderful Matt Paul in the usual way that you would. Rather than talk about those options now, give us a call and we can discuss any part of finance that is in your area of need. So thanks everyone, thanks for coming.
Just a quick one, Melbourne Cup increase.
What did you say?
Melbourne Cup increase.
Sadly, I think they'll sneak one in when we're all distracted, yes. Yeah.
All right, I'll get you to exit the couch, and I'd like to, thank you, Brendan. I would love now to welcome up John Hopkins. John Hopkins is a very dear friend of mine. I met John in 2000 when I first started at Hudson, and I was an advisor, and John was running the Hopkins Group. John, come up here. Welcome, John Hopkins. John is the executive chairman of the Hopkins Group, started his property business back in the 80s, and over the last few years has become somewhat of a mentor to me in business. John developed his first property at the age of 22, bought his first house at 15, so has many years of experience. And I was just hoping that John would share a little bit of his wisdom and experience with us tonight about property before I get the rest of the property guys up.
Thanks, Juanita, and everybody to have somebody like Juanita respect and look up to me as she has done, not or just said tonight, but as she has done for many years is a great honour to me. It's nice to have anybody respect you and look up to you, and to have somebody that is doing the things and has done the things that Juanita has done. It's a bloody compliment, frankly, and that's the way I see it. So I don't think she's misguided, but maybe she is. You know, the thing is, isn't it? It's all about leadership. And you know, today, everybody, leadership isn't like it used to be, where it was one person. And any good leader respects the fact that there are two issues that they don't think about it. It just happens. And that is the first is equality. Like, everybody is equal. Everybody in the world is equal. I'm not saying anything that anybody in this room would disagree with. I don't think we talk about these things enough. And I think the second thing is respect. And if you put those two things together, you know, the world can be, you know, your oyster. And to be frank with you, you know, Juanita says that she's admired me. Well, I damn well admire her. And I think she's got those things in spades. She's just got those things in every way that anybody could have. And it shows. And it was only yesterday I was speaking to somebody about about organisations, and they said to me, he's a good mate of mine from Perth, who I think it's Paul from Perth, is it? Daniel, you'd know Gavin Hegney, and Gavin's a good mate of mine, and he was talking about leadership, and he was saying that a good leader makes certain everybody around them feels worthwhile, makes certain that everybody around them has a purpose, makes certain that everybody around them is fully respected and equal to anybody in the organisation. And I can tell you, because I have watched the Hudson organisation for many years and been very close, very involved, and Juanita's doing it in spades, and I don't say that in any way that she needs to lead the people she's got, because there's a great group of people, and you've heard from many of them tonight. So, that's what I'd say, darling. Yeah. No, about me, everybody, I don't think we've got enough time. So you might get home for breakfast, I don't know. No, you won't. It's fair to say that I did have my first property when I was 15, and I sort of count my involvement in property, and I'll be very brief, because, we've had a good evening, and we've met some of the people that are working towards advising you, and whether advising you or they're your associates and you're working with them, and it's terrific, because they're obviously, very well educated in their fields. But it is correct to say that I was involved in property very early. I lived on Phillip Island. My dad was a doctor down there. And to send 4 of us to boarding school, which isn't bloody cheap, he started to do land subdivisions. And so at sort of 14, 15, 16, I was handing out for sale, forms. And I had my first business at 16. I bought a tractor in partnership with Dad, and I was doing all the subdivisions and tidying them up for him and so on. So that interest developed there, but it particularly became important to me because after 7 years at secondary school, most people do 6, but I thought I'd just do another 2 years at year 11. I was enjoying it. And got to year 12, and after the exams, my old man said to me, don't forget, this is 7 years at boarding school. He said, how'd you go, son? I said, I didn't do well, Dad. I didn't do too well, Dad. I failed. He said, how do you know? He said, the results aren't yet. I said, I only sat for 2, Dad. So no wonder I failed 2 exams out of 8. Anyhow, property's very interesting, Instead of talking about me, except to say this, I can hold the mantle, and my company can hold the mantle of being the first property investment advising organisation in the country, okay? In fact, a lot of people say they were, the worst thing I think anybody could say of me is that I told something that wasn't correct, and so that's fact. Probably the other thing you could say about our organisation is that we were probably the first. Now, in Surfers Paradise and the Gold Coast and other places, there'd be buildings that would be sold out, but we were definitely the first that'd go to Bob Hamilton at Mirvac and say, Bob, out of those 20 properties, out of those 100 properties, we'd like to buy 50 of them or 40 of them or 60 of them. So that whole issue about property investment and purchasing, to say that we invented property investment is not right. To say what I said is absolutely accurate. So we've had a great deal of experience up and down the eastern seaboard, and probably I'd like to say that things change, but they don't change. Do your financial planning conservatively and correctly, acquire the right investments, give them time. That was written by us in the early 80s, in the mid-80s. Now, I don't mean, again, I don't want to hold on to that for one moment as if we invented these things. We didn't. Because, Warren Buffett was mentioned and other, amazing, investment gurus and so on. So I don't say that, but I can say to you, things don't change, but they do. So what's changed? Well, probably the biggest and greatest impact, single impact in property throughout the world, but definitely Australia, is the change in technology. Secondly is the need for population growth to keep our economy on the up and up. Now we've been blessed with the English system of law. We have very solid financial planks. We have very solid economic circumstances, and we have the most wonderful country that's developed, you know, from the Second World War into the most delightful, what's the word I'm trying to think of, everybody? Mixed population, what's the word? Assimilated, yeah, the most beautiful country in the world. Now you put those things together and you think of property. Well, we've got a bloody good base to start from, you know, so that's all there. But what else has changed? Well, we've said from day one people should buy the best inner urban property in a major metropolis. We say high to medium density for reasons of ease of property management. But and early days through to early 90s, mid 90s, we said the only two metropolises in Australia were Melbourne and Sydney, and I think that was correct. But look at this wonderful metropolis. It's a metropolis now. Like, it's got its own strengths, it's got its own purposes, and you know, there is no doubt that 20 years ago, you know, Brisbane became a metropolis. Adelaide's not, but that doesn't mean it doesn't have potential. Perth is very much driven by, you know, iron ore, and is it going to take over with lithium when they're not taking any more ore out of the ground? So the metropolises are very important, but technology has taken it to regions. And so the property markets have changed, but there are some very important issues that are just the same as they ever were. It's population size, it's economy strength, it's markets for both owner-occupiers and for occupiers. And too often, you know, there's been this investor stock, which is a damn joke, because if it's investor stock as dictated by some, it means it's not popular to owner-occupiers. Well, you've just cut out 60% of your market if you're trying to rely on investors to sell property. It has to be owner-occupier based. Now, that doesn't mean that an apartment in Sydney or Melbourne or Brisbane isn't a good investment, but what we want to know we've got occupiers in tenants, occupiers in owner-occupiers, buyers in investors, and buyers in owner-occupiers. And sort of fundamentally, that's where it is. Now, that hasn't changed. That hasn't changed. So that's all I'm going to say.
Thank you, John. Okay, John, I'm going to, where's Brad? Brad Cullen-Smith works with John Hopkins. He is head of property down in Melbourne. Welcome to the stage, Brad.
Do you want me to sit next to him or?
No, I sit next to John. How long, actually, do you want to grab another microphone, John? Because you take my only microphone. How long have you two worked together? Too long.
Thank you. Go.
This is the first time I've ever done it. I'm a real fan of Dean Martin. And I said to Katie, I said, I'd just love to take a Scotch up on stage. Some of you are too young to know who Dean Martin is. Oh.
Thank you, Gordon. Isn't he a bit of Gordon Gecko? Hey, don't you think tonight? Katie? I say that with the utmost respect. Before I talk about property, I just want to thank Hudson, yourself, and also this man, because it's great when you can say that you work. Well, you don't really work. I do what I love. And John gave me the opportunity 4 odd years ago to be able to join with the Hopkins Group and continue to do what I love. And I think, irrespective of what I say in regards to property tonight, I just want to say, find your passion. Sometimes it takes a while. Sometimes you try and fail. But eventually, if you find it, hold it and don't let it go. That's the best advice I can give you. Not to mention, some great investments down in Melbourne. Just very briefly, I want to talk about Mexico for a little bit. You may have, for those of you who sit outside our great state, you may understand that
Brisbane. You're talking Brisbane.
No, outside our great state of Victoria, you might understand that we've got some challenges. And the challenges we've had is we're up against, dare I say it, capitalism. So when you feel like you're working your hardest to invest your best earned dollar and the government is doing their hardest to take it away, it can be a little bit despondent. However, there are some key statistics about Victoria that I think are really interesting. One of them is we have a vacancy rate in tenancies of 1.1%.
That's very impressive. Now, tell me about Brisbane's vacancy rate, though.
Hey? Yeah, it's less than 1. So, as a country, and when we talk about Queensland versus Victoria versus New South Wales versus Adelaide and Perth and so forth, where do we invest? We invest where the market is. We invest where the clients are. And what we can't do is we can't predict the future. But what we can do is we can say, if you're in a position now to invest and you're looking for a property investment as a diversity for all your other investments, which I'm sure all the advisors will tell you need to, property across the eastern seaboard's a pretty good thing.
Property is great. If you've got cash flow and time, property is excellent. It's for savings. You get tax benefits for it. Someone else is paying for your mortgage. I absolutely love property as an asset class. I think particularly also because I'm not the best saver. I'm terrible at saving. If I've got shares, liquid funds there, it's too accessible for me. So property's always been a really attractive investment option for me. But again, cash flow is king, but cash flow and time, and I don't think you can go wrong. Melbourne, I should probably actually, do you mind if I invite some of the other guys up here as well?
Only if they're going to support what I'm saying.
Well, Michael Taylor. Michael Taylor, where is Michael? Michael, a lot of Hudson clients will have heard of Terry Taylor over the years, long association with specific property. Michael Taylor is Terry Taylor's son. Melbourne, born and bred, but actually does a lot of work in Brisbane. And I also want to invite Luke Best. Luke Best, fellow Brisbaneite. He'll support my love of Queensland over here. Coming up. Luke works for Position Property in Brisbane. And, I need another chair. Chris, can you? Yeah. And Daniel Porfilippi, all the way from Perth. I've got my furthest property extraordinaire coming up here. Dan's come all the way over from Perth for us tonight. He works for the agency in Perth. He gets his own special chair on the end there. That's okay. Now we can get back into Melbourne. I'm gonna handball it over to Michael here, because I spoke to Michael the other day and he's also a big fan of Melbourne at the moment. So you'll be happy to know he's on the couch.
Yeah,
and,
thanks,
yeah.
Juanita. Thank you again for the opportunity and welcome everybody. I think it's a great function that Hudson's put on tonight, and hopefully you're all getting something out of it. But I really believe in the story in Melbourne right now, just like I believed in the story in Brisbane 5 or 6 years ago. And I think there are a number of reasons that Melbourne really sticks out at the moment, predominantly around a whole lot of kind of macroeconomic statistics that I love numbers, they talk to you. But Melbourne has the largest population growth in terms of immigration in Australia. It has for a long period of time. It's a very multicultural city. So that's always going to underpin population growth and price growth in terms of demand. So that's, I think, one really important factor. More than that, I think we see cities go through cycles, and Brisbane obviously has gone through an exceptionally large growth spurt over the last few years, partly driven by COVID, but also due to the fact that if you look back at historical median house prices, Brisbane lagged Sydney and Melbourne for a long period of time, and we've seen, as Brisbane often does, it plateaus for a long period of time and then has some substantial growth to counter that. I think if we look at Melbourne, there's an argument to say at the moment Melbourne may be on the brink of that wave now. And so I pulled some data out of the ABS and had a look at the statistics around median price growth over the last 10 years, for example. And Melbourne has actually been the worst performing East Coast capital out of Sydney, Brisbane, Melbourne and Canberra. And that's one thing that I look at and say, well, why is that? Well, obviously COVID's had, and our lockdowns has had a serious effect on people leaving Melbourne and population leaving at some point in time. We're now seeing that population come back to Melbourne. But what does it really mean? It means that Melbourne's median house price is effectively only $10,000 more than Brisbane's median house price at this point in time, right now, where we stand, which many of you may not actually think about. And for a city of 5.5 million people, the largest city in Australia now by population, versus a city of 2.5 million in Brisbane, there are some substantial reasons why that should not be the case. The ABS data also, the median price data, basically also shows that the historical gap between the median house price in Sydney and Melbourne is at its largest in 30 years. So I see with immigration, with low median prices versus other capitals on the East Coast, with new growth in terms of, we're all suffering the same thing in terms of supply issues and constraints around new property being brought to the market, whether that's greenfield developments, whether it's inner urban developments, there's a whole range of issues that have been brought around by COVID and supply issues and constraints. So, if I had to park my money anywhere at the moment, if you were looking at property as an investment, then I love Brisbane, I love Sydney, I love all of the other capitals. I think property anywhere that you do long term is terrific. But I think Melbourne, from my perspective anyway, at this point in time, represents the best potential growth. And as was said before, obviously you can't crystal ball anything. No one can absolutely tell you what's going to happen in the future. But if you look at what the numbers are saying, there's every potential that Melbourne will be the best performing market in Australia over the next 5 years.
Daniel, you might have something to say about this. Perth has had an amazing 12 months, double-digit growth. It's the city of the year so far, in my opinion. Counteract Michael here.
I love hearing statistics because they can always be, weaved any way you like. But everything was correct. But I think Perth's been having a big correction. It was very flat. Perth and Brisbane are actually very similar in how they behave. It was very flat for a decade and potentially very undervalued. It was the cheapest capital city in Australia, and it's usually fourth, just behind Brisbane typically. So it had a lot of catch up to do, and it now has a lot more catch up to go because we've got a massive undersupply. So Perth at the moment, you're talking about rental vacancies, it's at 0.4%. So it's very, very low, and because there's so many supply issues, they're not building fast enough. And then in terms of population growth, as a percentage, or as a metric, obviously Melbourne's far greater, but as a percentage of population, Perth's population growth is going to be about 8.5% per annum over the next decade, and they can't build enough houses. So, and that's made up of net migration from interstate, so a lot of people are moving interstate to Perth and overseas, and largely driven by what John was saying earlier, the mining sector. Obviously, it's an opportunity for people to buy relatively cheap homes in Perth and earn pretty big money working in the mining sector. But at the moment, there's just a massive undersupply. So there's really good opportunities from an investment point of view. Average properties in the city are sort of getting 6-7% yield. And certainly in regional areas like Port Hedland, double-digit 10% plus yield, government guaranteed leases in place for 10 years. So there's some really good investment opportunities in places like Port Hedland, which is one of the biggest ports in the world in terms of how much shipping goes in and out of that place and iron ore every year.
Luke, Brisbane. We all love Brisbane. Everyone in this room loves Brisbane. Come on, Luke.
All right,
Bring Brisbane home,
I'm thinking
Luke.
I should stand up.
Brisbane is what is Brisbane?
Brisbane, look, I'm born and bred Brisbane, so I am biased towards it. But I think I've been selling real estate in Brisbane for 24 years now, and typically all of that has been new and off the plan townhomes and apartments and high-end homes. But in addition to that, I've personally invested in Brisbane, in Greater Brisbane, right across this wonderful city of ours. Probably the most exciting thing for me is that I think every capital city we've got at the moment in Australia, and Australia in general, is positioned to be the best place to invest in real estate. And that's for a number of reasons, but I think if you consider what happened a couple of years ago with COVID and look at how we handled that and how we were left alone in many ways, I think, you know, from around the globe, people are looking at our country and saying, that's a place I wouldn't mind living. So if you're going to migrate out of wherever you're currently living and you want to move and pick up your family and take them to a pretty special place, you would have to be hard-pressed to find anywhere better than Australia. Next year, we're going to see 500,000 people moving into Australia from overseas. They have opened the borders, and that's going to continue. So there's no doubt that we will see an influx of skilled workers coming into Australia, which is great. And typically, they do land in Melbourne and or Sydney. But I hate the weather and leave. Yeah, after a while, they hear about this place up north, and they head north. And we're seeing it again. We've seen it before, but historical levels of interstate migration coming into Queensland, and there's direct correlation. I don't have any graphs, but there's direct correlation of the people leaving New South Wales and leaving Victoria, and they're coming into Queensland. So. And thanks for getting them ready for a great place to live. And they come here, and we have really learnt a lot as a young city off our sister states down south. And I do believe that. I love those cities. I love spending time there. But I live here, and I can tell you that there is one thing I can tell you about a crystal ball fact here in Brisbane, and that is we've got an Olympic Games in 2032. There is billions and billions and billions of dollars being spent. There's a bridge right behind you going in. There's a casino going in over here. We've got new city cats. We've got new weird light rail buses on tyres. But hey, it's infrastructure. All that stuff is creating jobs. We're at record low unemployment. We're at a vacancy rate of 0.9%. I can tell you our company, Position Property, we have 608 properties under property management, and as of this afternoon, my BDM told me we had 2 vacancies. They're both open for inspection tomorrow. We'll expect around 30 or 40 applications on each property. There is nothing for rent. We sell, on average, around about 50 to 60 properties per month. That is all new properties. So we cover Bayside, Logan, Greater Brisbane, Moreton, and out sort of almost to Ipswich, and that's a good number of properties that are brand new. 77% of those last year were to owner-occupiers, and that trend is continuing. So we're not providing housing for new people coming in. We are drastically undersupplied, and that's probably in every city and right across the country. So it is a fundamental fact that supply and demand is really a great way to establish whether you should buy real estate. At the moment, there's a heap of demand and there is no supply. From my point of view, building new stuff and delivering new product, it has never been more difficult. And it's not getting materials. Labour costs are certainly high and time is a problem, but it's not getting the material, it's getting approvals. It's getting councils and government to move things through. It's getting councils and government to agree to incentivise developers to deliver, and we were speaking about this earlier. The private sector needs to deliver the product. Government and council will not deliver it quick enough. We can do it, they can't. But they need to cut the red tape to do it. And as you know, that doesn't happen quickly. So if you invest in real estate, always, and it's an absolute privilege to be up here on this stage with John tonight, and you fine gentlemen as well, but the fundamental facts are buy well, buy something that you would live in, and I'm very pleased to say that to have that many people, owner-occupiers buying the product that we're delivering here in Brisbane is a testament to the product we're delivering now. 15 years ago, it wasn't that. So the number of families that I live in apartments. I've lived in apartments for 24 years. And the people that are now living amongst, that I'm living amongst, seeing kids growing up in apartments and playing out in the grass that we build and put pools in and going to school locally and living that lifestyle that is a metropolis lifestyle is really, it's awesome to see. So don't discount it. Don't think that it's only the place that investment people live or tenants live. It's a great way of life, and if you're considering downsizing, there's excellent benefits to throw some money into super. But I'll let you talk about it. I'm not allowed to talk about that.
I actually just read something about the happiness factor is actually higher for people that live in medium to high density,
so much time.
amenities, than out in a outer suburb where there's no amenities, there's no community. I did actually just read a lot about that. The happiness factor is a lot higher.
Yeah, well,
in those,
so maintenance. I mean, thankfully I've never really mown too many lawns in my life. I haven't had to paint walls and do all that sort of stuff. But I work really hard. I work 6 days a week. So that 1 day a week for me is really important. If I had to mow lawns and hedge gardens and do all that sort of stuff, no good. I'd rather go and throw my money into the economy. I'd probably need to talk to you about spending habits, but look, it's. I guess all in all, Brisbane's a great place. It's got excellent weather. A little bit of rain today, but we just had to do that to make these guys feel welcome. But aside from that, it is a stunning place to live. It's got so much potential. I personally think we've got a couple of good years of growth over the next 2 years, solid growth. I think it will plateau after that for a couple of years, but as we lead into the Olympics, as we've seen historically in other cities where they've had the Olympics coming in, a lot of attention from around the world, and I think we'll see a little spike there from sort of 2008 through to 30, and then we'll see what happens after that. But that's just me, in my opinion. Can't go wrong with property. Here.
Is that? No. Yep. Yeah, I just think after listening to these four blokes, I'm the most independent view that sits on this panel. Jesus. The fact is that all the metropolis that we're speaking about, all the cities we're speaking about are metropolises. And one of the things that interested me very early in our business is that when you ever mention the words property investment, the first thing most people go to is property. And they start to think, oh, well, what will it be? Will it be Sydney? Will it be Melbourne? Will it be Perth? Will it be whatever? They forget the they forget the investment. They forget the whole criteria around investment. Now, it's about an individual. Do your financial planning conservatively and correctly, as I said before, acquire the right investments, give them time. Now, property, 10 years cycle, 10 years minimum. And which city? Well, frankly, we've got, Brad and I today had a most positive inspection at some properties we've recommended in Manly, and, really pleased. We're right behind Brisbane. I've mentioned before, Daniel, don't like dropping names, but I know you know who Gavin Hegney is. He's Mr. Property in Western Australia. That's fair, isn't it? Yeah. Yep. And, I was speaking to Gavin, recently this week, and he said, John, if there's an issue for Perth, it's too hot. Now, question will sit here, is Brisbane too hot? But I'm not telling you to buy in Melbourne. I'm telling you Melbourne's been flat for 10 years. Now if you've got a 10-year cycle to fit, where would you purchase? Now, I think there's a lot of growth for the reasons that you mentioned, Daniel, in terms of future markets. But I also agree with you, Michael. If you sat back and tried to be as independent as possible, Melbourne's an opportunity. But, my father, he'd be very surprised, as a bloody beautiful man. He used to say, John, if the truth sounds like a lie, don't say it. Well, so I think it's true. I think Melbourne's got a bit. Don't you, Luke? I mean, it
I
has.
agree, 100%.
But everything
yeah.
everybody else has said, we're talking about metropolises. Buy well in these metropolises, hold the bloody property for 10 years or 20 years.
I think what's more important, John, is the right property, as you say.
Sorry, the right property. Okay, I interfered.
One of our wealthiest clients we've ever retired bought 5 or 6 properties 30 years ago, held them for 30 years, never changed them, didn't spend any money on them, rented them out, bought them 30 years ago for 150 grand each, sold them over the last few years, ended up with about $7 million in his super over the years, living on a very tax effective income purely from buying a property and not selling it at all. You just hold that property. You do not sell. You don't sell for anything. You don't sell unless you have a trigger moment. But if you buy and hold property, it's as guaranteed as it gets, you know. John was just saying that it's about the right property, but I think there's 5 amazing property heavyweights here tonight. We've got a little wave machine somewhere. Where's Katie, my marketing girl? Katie, thank you, Katie, by the way, for tonight. You've done an amazing job. You've done a brilliant job. Thank you, Katie. Woo! Katie, we've got a wave machine. If you put your phone against the machine, it will bring up all the details for all everyone here tonight. Where is it?
I was wondering.
Where all the relics are.
Are we surfing?
Where all the relics are on the back. So if you put your phone over it, yeah, it's very cool. Everyone's details comes up, so you can contact any of these guys directly. Melbourne, Brisbane, Perth, take your pick. Actually, now while I've got you all, one question: established house and land. I know we've just covered apartments a little bit. Versus units at the moment. So I know that house and land has done amazing. I know units haven't quite done as well, especially in Brisbane. House and land's doubled, basically. I would say it's pretty much doubled in the inner city, you know. Yeah, units haven't quite had a run yet.
Look, so apartments have just gone up around 8% over the last 12 months.
They're having their run now, aren't they?
Yeah, they are having a run. It's really about supply. It's the first time for me to see a parity between new product and existing product as far as, I call it product, sorry, as far as price goes. So the second-hand market is actually catching up and very close to that new off-plan pricing. And that's purely around the fact that there isn't the supply of product coming, so it's not there. So if you consider, 77-80% of people buying new houses, new apartments and townhomes to move into, they're selling, it's not many first home buyers. The pricing, it's not many first home buyers. The majority of them are downsizers. They're selling the big home, putting money into super because that's a great idea, and then buying an apartment. So the big home isn't typically, if it's a big old house and needs renovating, it's probably not going to be bought by an investor and filled with tenants. It's probably going to be bought by someone leaving Melbourne or Sydney or migrating or upscaling their family or whatever it is and living in it. So you've got less and less and less product available for tenants. So the apartment prices are just going up and up and up.
I'm going to be slightly controversial, as we do. House and land, we have a product down in Victoria that has started to grow legs, which is a thing called a rooming house. It's classified as a Class 1B dwelling, and it really is taking established house and land, so houses particularly probably 30 years plus of age, and it's about converting those houses. Sometimes it's about converting the existing dwelling, and sometimes it's about demolition and spec building purely for the rooming house market. But these properties are on average 9 rooms, and each room averages around $300 to $350 per week in rent income, which is great. It solves a rental crisis that we're experiencing at the moment. The median 1-bedroom rental price in Melbourne is $450 a week. When you talk about living in an apartment, it's no different to living in a rooming house. You walk past somebody else's door. You're sharing common facility. So a rooming house is a new old, but it's growing legs for us as an organisation. We specialise in acquiring sites, converting them, demolition and build. But I would say it's a new way of investing in house and land, as opposed to just buying an established property and saying, I'm going to try and get 30 grand a year or 40 grand a year in rental income. Our average is, where our least profitable property is returning $96,000 a year.
What sort of yield's that on the?
That's going to be around 11% gross. Our best performing property is 147,000. It's a yield play, but secondary to the yield play, it's also capital growth over a long period of time, because we advise our clients not to buy and get out. It's a long play. It's a 10-year, and you think about that income over 10 years versus your traditional rental income, and now the expenses, eroding that income. It's a pretty good option. The other thing that we really like about it is it's a diversified risk. So when you have a rental property, you've got a family living in that property. If they stop paying the rent, there's no backup. If you've got 9 residents living in one dwelling and one person is a delinquent, you've still got another 8 who are paying you rental income. So we classify it as a very low risk, high yield, appreciating asset over time, which I think is worthwhile people knowing about, because it's not commonly known.
No, so I won't. I know we've probably run out of time now. I think I'm being wrapped up, but we haven't even touched on the commercial space or anything like that. But just briefly, post-COVID commercial space, do you all see a big change across the cities commercially, or are you seeing it coming back on now that things have sort of settled? And anyone got any brief?
Just to say this, like COVID's had a huge effect, but I think you also have to add into COVID the point that I was alluding to before, is that technology related with COVID has created this huge migration to regions. And, you've experienced it in Brisbane with Gold Coast and Sunshine Coast, but we haven't experienced it so much in Victoria. And it's bloody happened, like Geelong, down past Geelong, East Gippsland, on the Murray River. So it's impacted our city to a great degree. The honest answer, which isn't easy to come by from the commercial agents, is that it's just terrifying what's happening with commercial rents. It doesn't mean tenants aren't upgrading, like a bank making a move goes to the new accommodation and the new building's okay, but what it leaves behind in terms of office property, commercial property, big gap.
Yeah, I'll just say on that, John, I think it'll change. I think it'll come back. I think this is a temporary moment, and I think if you speak to many, CEOs and managing directors and COOs of companies, they're starting to bring people back into the office in a more forceful way. Let's be honest. And we're already seeing some effects of people coming back from the regions in Victoria. So we're seeing vacancy rates in regional centres like Ballarat and Bendigo and some of those other areas that are starting to increase now. We're seeing some decrease in median prices in those areas. And conversely, Melbourne's vacancy rate, which was up at 3 or 4% during COVID, has now, as you say, tightened considerably. And so that's another reason why, potentially, as there's less and less stock in Melbourne, that we'll start to see some continued growth, I think, in terms of median prices in Melbourne as well.
Thank you. Thank you to all of my amazing property guys here tonight. All their details are available, like I said earlier. And of course, when you're talking with your advisor, it'll be the strategies that we can do, cash flows that we can do. We can look at adding property to your portfolio. We can look at cash flows. There's pretty much nothing that we can't do. You just have to talk to us.